All right, it's 4:06. We'll go ahead and convene. Thank you all for those that are joining us virtually online for today's, what is it, March's Education Subcommittee Mayor's Commission on Reparations Education Subcommittee meeting. My name is Cornell Ellis. I'm the Executive Director and Co-founder of Brothers Liberating Our Communities and the Chair of the Education Subcommittee for Reparations for Black Citizens in Kansas City. So again, really happy that you're here, really happy for the conversation we're going to be embarking on today. We'll get started with just a quick roll call and call to order. Mr. Goodman, can you run us through a roll call, please?
Yes, I can. Commissioner Ellis.
Here.
Commissioner Tauheed.
Here.
Commissioner Bowles, absent, and Commissioner Morris, absent. Roll has been taken.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Did not meet last month due to the festivities occurring here in Kansas City, the festivities and the tragedy, unfortunately. So I will recognize that publicly, that it was not all positive that day. And we do want to, our hearts and our minds go out to the victims, and not just typical victims, all those that were impacted by that day's events. As educators and those that are focused in education, criminality is directly tied to that. And that's a great segue into a bit of the conversation I want to have today. But again, thank you for having us. Professor Tauheed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. I'm Linwood Tauheed, obviously a member of the Education Subcommittee, member of the larger Reparations Commission. I'm also a member of the Health Subcommittee, and I'm the chair of the Economic Subcommittee. I'm a professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, KC.
Thank you. I'm also a member of the Healthcare Committee as well. I forgot to mention. So I am not the chair, but I am a member. So I'm happy to serve and happy to be a part of this process. Today, we're going to be going through a quick chair report. I'll just be kind of talking about some of the things that have been on my mind and some of the things that I've been working on. And some of the things that I'll work on will roll into the guest speaker look ahead and the look ahead and any work that we have today, which would be adjusting some of the things that I'll introduce in the chair report. And then we'll open up for public comment. So we're at 4:10 right now. I anticipate us being done around 4:45 or so. And hopefully being able to have some time. I hear we have 2 participants in the audience. Hopefully I don't bore you all. We'll have some good questions, maybe have some conversation with the public. Great, so let's jump into a chair report. Again, I just want to use this as a standing opportunity for me as the chair to be able to think and talk out loud with the rest of the subcommittee about what things I've been thinking about, having conversations about in relation to education reparations that may be relevant for the work that we're doing, the conversations we're having. This month, I'm actually having conversations today with a member of the Kansas City Police Department and Melissa Johnson, who's running for prosecutor of Jackson County. Young Black woman who grew up together, a good friend of mine, and a person who has started to help shift the way that I think about reactionary and reactions to crime, policies towards crime. Now, for those of you that may be thinking to yourselves, like, this isn't the Justice Committee, or this isn't the criminal justice committee, I believe that all of the harm areas are interconnected, and most of which education can almost be a foundation and a predictor and often a deterrent, therefore, to criminal behavior. And so, when I start thinking about some of the recent tragedies that have occurred in Kansas City and just the gun violence trend in Kansas City itself, if you know anything about the homicide rate in Kansas City, it trends higher than most cities in the United States. And right now, we're on pace for another record year already of non-fatal shootings and of violent shootings. And when I think about what happened, homicides, and when I think about these juveniles that are engaging in some of this hostile behavior, my first questions are, what school did they go to? Who was their former principal? What were some of the things that were put in place to be able to mitigate some of their behavior? What are some of the signs that we saw while these young folks were students that we may have been able to mitigate? What were their achievement like? Going all the way back to early childhood and thinking about, what kinds of behaviors did they show? Did they have pre-K, access to pre-K? Were they reading on grade level by third grade? Some of these predictors that we know directly lead to criminality through our longitudinal research and connectivity with education and the penitentiary may be able to be used to backwards plan and be able to think about how our students are being mitigated from some of these lifestyles, right? And so today I'm having conversations with the again, prosecutor and a police officer. His name is Jonas, I can't pronounce his name, Bowman, who's working on a program called Risk Terrain Management, RTM. And Risk Terrain Management is a program for preventative crime where they analyze external environmental factors and their propensity towards a more criminal area, right? So we think about convenience stores, or we think about busted out street lights, or we think about alleyways, or we think about unboarded up abandoned houses, or we think about some things that we typically think about in dilapidated neighborhoods as being an environmental factor that increases the probabilities of crimes, in which therefore police officers can then, and police officers and other community organizations, right? They did make that very clear, right? It's not just police, it's also community organizations going in to mitigate and try to prevent crime, right? I am, as I was driving over to this meeting, I was kind of ruminating over some of the facts and some of the things that we were talking about. I think that a lot of the data that they're collecting could be potential for, again, data of the data that they're looking at around, they will overlap these indicators of risk factors is what they will call them, right? And, again, I kind of listed off some of those risk factors, right? That will, whether they be convenience stores that just sell vapes and blunt wraps, or whether they be clubs or nighttime establishments, whether they be areas that are parks for homeless encampments, right? Some of these environmental factors that are then recognized could then be, again, backwards planned for our data as reparations researchers, right? We'll be able to take kind of the current data. My beef with them, this is very like bias and prejudice. So I'm like having conversations with them about that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this risk terrain management itself. But I think, again, we could potentially use some of the data crafted from the risk terrain management and some of the environmental factors that they identify as, again, like having high propensity for crime, for being areas that we could then research and reinvest in, right? Again, my conversations around philanthropy and how philanthropy should be responsible for a lot of these, or play a role in at least a lot of these reparatory efforts. As we start to identify some of these blighted areas, how can we start to partner with the real players in the city to be able to repair them? And maybe our commission could be a part of that work. What are you thinking?
Well, thinking in this, one of the things that immediately came to mind was back in 2001, I was a member of the then superintendent of the Kansas City, Missouri School District, a member of his cabinet. I had the title of Administrative Operations Officer. And one of the things I was asked to do was to do some research to determine which students in the school district would benefit from being moved, if you will, out of the school district in general into one of the three alternative schools. At the time, there were three alternative schools: Genesis, Alta Vista, and De La Salle. And those schools would take about 100 students from the Kansas City, Missouri School District each year. So we were looking at 300 students among, oh, if I remember the population at the time, somewhere around 20,000, maybe 25,000 students. And we understood that the capacity for putting them in alternative schools, we had more students who would benefit from that experience than they had capacity. So we had to decide on which students would be, I guess, the most benefited by that experience. And of course, that experience was based on an understanding that many of our students who were not doing well, when they went into alternative school settings, they did well in those settings. They had a different approach. And so I was asked to figure out, which 300 students would be most eligible. And I'm deliberately avoiding a term that was the term that was used at the time, which was to figure out our most at-risk students. And that term is still used.
Right, it's not just the term of the time.
Right, it's still used. And as I'm going through the literature on at-riskness, one of the factors that was being used to put a student into a category of being at risk was race, whether they were Black. And I had a problem with that. And so I refused in my statistical analysis. I did not include the race of the student in the category as a variable in their at-riskness. What I thought was, look, if we have students who are, and we're talking about students who are at risk of dropout, if you will, dropping out in ninth grade. But if we have students who are entering the ninth grade who are reading at third and fourth grade level, who are doing math at third and fourth grade level, that itself was a factor that might lead them to want to drop out of school because they're so far behind. The curriculum at that time, for example, a student going into ninth grade then and now would be in an algebra class. Well, you're not going to do very well in algebra class if you can't multiply, subtract, add, and divide. And so students going into ninth grade we saw a large portion of those students, a number of those students dropping out. And then there's also the legal factor, and that a student can't drop out of school legally before they are, I think it's 14 years old, which is a ninth grader. The typical ninth grader is 14 years old. So we're finding that students, as soon as they can drop out, if they have some other issues, are dropping out of school. And so what I did put in my statistical model, not race, but I put in, obviously their grade level in terms of standardized test scores, but also their attendance record, going back to third grade, attendance records, other kinds of things that would have been, in my understanding, causal of their being so far behind in grade level at ninth grade that they would have a tendency, a propensity to drop out. And in that model, I did not include race. Now, it happened to be correlated with race.
Right. But the causation.
But I refuse to look at race as a causation. And I think as we go through this, I think, in fact, I'm certain that in these analyses, the idea of causation is much, much too simplistic. And so the title of at risk, where you include a student's race, and if they are Black, they are given a higher at risk score, begs the question of whether or not that Black student would be at risk if the school district was properly educating them.
Right.
In other words, if you have two students, or you have a group of students, one group of students Black and one students not Black, who are at the same grade level, who are doing as well in school because the school district is doing well, Would the Black student be more at risk than the not Black student? I doubt it. So it's not the issue of them being Black. It's the issue of the structure of society, in this case, the educational system, that puts at riskness on Black folks. In other words, we're talking about the harm that the system has done to them because of their Blackness. This is the essence of a moral claim for reparations. And so, that's the problem I have with the term at risk, is that in the at-risk literature, there's an assumption that if you are Black, you are automatically at risk. And it ignores the structure in the system, in this case, education system. But as you said, these are all these systems are interconnected. Education, economics, housing, and so forth are all interconnected to create a heightened at-riskness for persons of African descent in this country.
Yeah, the race as a causation for malachievement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the data even is still clear that within charter schools or within districts that are higher performing, the Black students still are performing the lowest among even higher performing districts. Now they may be outperforming lower performing districts, right? Other Black students in lower performing districts, but they still are performing lower than their white peers within the same districts. And so I think that also is kind of what's throwing my brain off is like racism is because of race, right? Like they created racism to treat Black people different, but then the output is that Black people are treated differently, which create different outcomes, right? And so that's what I think also was killing me about the risk terrain management, risk terrain modeling, is that you talk about dilapidated communities, they were purposely created, and those types of people, Black people, were purposely put into dilapidated communities, which then leads to crime, right? And criminality becomes a race thing in the end, when it started as a race thing, but it was on the other side of the coin, right? It was imposed on them.
Well, Commissioner Ellis, maybe I can do this. I use my same thinking in my dissertation. I'm an economist, but my dissertation is in the economics of education. And I created a model. It was a statistical model that I validated against actual data, a national study of student proficiency in reading. And I use, obviously, the race of the student comes into the model. But instead of attaching the race of the student to the student part of the model, I attach the race of the student to the teacher part of the model. And hypothesize that the teacher is treating students differently because of their race. So it's not the race of the student, it's what the teacher thinks about the race of the student that makes the difference. Right. At some point here, I'd like to share that model with this committee.
I would love that.
I really do like that as well. I like that as well.
What's up,
Dr. Peace, man. How's it going?
Good, sir. How are you?
Yes, good. Just got my add in on that is that I think that you hit the hammer on the nail, Dr. Tawhid, about the teacher portion. And I was coming at it from a different angle, because we know that when you look at, once I say this, you know exactly where I'm going, but standardized testing, those testing methods aren't suited to, our advantages. And so then it goes a level deeper than just a test, and it goes to the curriculum. So on top of the teacher, which is very paramount. I mean, I know of this study that I could actually send to you guys, but it shows that Black students that have one Black teacher our African kids have one Black teacher. It's like
30 over 30%.
30% likely to go to college. And then, if they have two Black teachers within their first 5 years, it jumps drastically to like 57%, something ridiculous. And so it's the curriculum, and once we center in on our African-centered education areas, that teach our curriculum a cultural-based, with cultural-based mindset, then, those types of things teach to our advantage as well. It helps out this whole, our kids are better, our best performing kids are lower on these testings than their peers over here. And it comes to the curriculum and definitely the teacher. So, I mean, that right there, when you really look at it, it's a no-brainer why they're in the situation they are. I mean, our kids are literally there with teachers that don't care and have these teachers shoving a curriculum down that doesn't, so, I mean, it's really about seeing some of these other curriculums that got out there, as well as just like you said, your dissertation, Commissioner Tawhid, where, I like to see that. And then I know that, I know that there's some good curriculum already out that we have from some of these culturally based schools. So, and there's even up and coming some that are still like going upon the national regime to like be, refined and all this. So even next level stuff, but I mean, things that have been around for decades in the past. So, I mean, we couple those together, it's going to be something powerful as far as, as far as changing this element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add something so that it's kind of understood here that when I say our causation, thinking about causation is too simplistic. The teacher is important because it's the teacher that is in direct contact with the student. Principals don't teach students. They may have when they were teachers, but of course parents are also in the role of teachers at times. But the main experience of our students going through public school is that they're in classrooms with teachers a lot. But it's not. I mean, it's what the teacher does that causes the issue. But teachers are also just products of society. That teachers, I wouldn't say that teachers don't care. Some don't. But I would say that teachers don't know how to teach our students, and they are also institutionalized into thinking that our students are not as capable as other students, and therefore they teach them less. But I can go over all of that if with the opportunity to go over my work here when we do that. And I think I would like to propose that not only we do that for our subcommittee meeting, but that when we have an education listening session, that I would like to expose that. But also, in terms of my work was very much informed by my work with the African Center Schools here. I say everything that I learned about education, I learned from Audrey Ballard, who was the Queen Mother and principal of that school system, and her descendants, if you will, Kevin and Jimmy Ballard, are also very much involved in education today, in this day and time. And I think if we have an education listening session, we should ask them to be speakers, maybe do keynotes for that listening session.
Yeah, I love that.
I definitely agree with that as well. And actually, just to speak on that, I could reach out to Brother Haru to set that up too, if to see if and or when he will be available.
Yeah, there's a portion of our meeting tonight where we'll be able to go over future speakers. I think I've heard a couple here tonight, including yourself, Professor, and we'll be able to add in that moment. So it is 4:30. Let's push ahead a little bit from the chair report to the work that I've been kind of diving into. I believe I got this model from Commissioner King, or maybe it was Commissioner Jones with the Healthcare Commission. But she had a PowerPoint that kind of allowed the commission to have all their work kind of in one place, have all their objectives and priorities, and as a subcommittee organized. So I really thought that that'd be something that could benefit us. So over the last couple months, I've been kind of putting one together. I'd love to share it with you now and get your feedback and add things as they come along. I think one thing that she made very clear to me was that this is a working and living document. So as we, we'll probably return to it at some point every meeting. So I think there's a couple places in here that may be relevant for us to touch pretty often. This is something that we will all have, that I'll drop into the teams, that we'll all have access to be able to contribute on. So we'll add a last updated every time. It's now last updated 3/13. Here are our members. I'm not missing anybody, am I? I know that Commissioner King is no longer with us. Okay. Purpose, priorities, areas of focus. Let me go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger for you guys.
Appreciate it.
Purpose, priorities, areas of focus, and actions. Again, I've literally just put these together before the meeting, but purpose: to identify the city policies and structures which impose harms and oppressions to those of African descent in the Kansas City metro area, specifically within the education community, for the purpose of recognizing and making means towards repair of found harms. I think that we've talked a lot about specifically the city policies and structures, and being really specific around that research. I use the term of African descent here to try to keep it broad, knowing that that's not really going to be our role to define eligibility, but to more so have conversations, again, specifically KC metro area education community, and then repair. I may add something about like repair and reconciliations. Does anybody see anything missing here in purpose?
Let me see. I'm looking at it on my phone.
Yeah, I need a minute. I need to review that for a minute myself. So
I'm gonna maybe there's a better way for us to do this. I know that I can share it with you guys.
Okay.
And then we could start there.
Yeah, if we can just maybe get a chance to review it and maybe make a comments at our next meeting.
Right. We can come back next week with that. Yeah. And then that next section was, then I'll kind of explain on my rationale here as long as it stops. It's gonna take forever because that's happening. And then the second section was priorities. So the difference kind of between purpose and priorities. When I think about priorities, I'm thinking about exactly like what we want our end goals to be, and kind of where specifically we will look. Priorities specifically kind of like where we specifically will look. So K through 12, I put K through 12 education spaces, specifically Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas. And then I listed, this is taking forever. Then I listed the counties, Clay, Jackson, Platte, which are three major ones, pretty sure. And then I listed an era as the DSEG era. So again, like I think priorities will really help us hone in as to maybe what are some of those big buckets of time, of space, that our investigators will be able to further their knowledge within, that we can kind of put our stake in the ground, not necessarily as being statements of harm, but as being places where we may find those statements of harm. The third one was objectives. So these also may need to be reordered, but pretty much objectives is just like, what are we trying to accomplish here? I know a lot of these kind of sound similar, but objectives would be through detailed and thorough investigation. Our subcommittee will uncover, this may go closer under purpose, we will uncover the direct lines of influence and an effect which negatively impacted Black students, or again, students of African descent in the education scene of Kansas City metropolitan area. Areas of focus kind of sounds similar to priorities, but I think, again, I was thinking more of buckets. I only have 3 here, and I think I may want to add a couple based on the conversation we've already had tonight. I need to reopen this thing. It just froze on me completely.
Is that okay?
Go ahead. Sorry, were you saying something, Will? Commissioner Bowles?
No, I was seeing. I was just about to say, did you think that we were looking at something, or is that file still loading? So, but you had answered it right then. So.
No, yeah, it was still loading. I'm not even sharing anymore. I wasn't even sharing anymore. I'll start sharing it again, like sharing my screen, and then I'll just send the copy out after our meeting.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. Just listening to it here, and that's fine.
Yeah, because I'm on the phone as well, so
no problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, again, trying to differentiate these 4 here. And we may want to combine some here. Again, I got this from Commissioner Jones. But again, objective areas of focus, then I tried to cut down to just 3, which would be student achievement, teacher diversity, school funding. Whereas like maybe areas of focus would be where we would start to really dive in on focus on the reparatory justice, right? These are the areas where we would focus in on maybe some of our impact. And then finally was the actions, which was kind of what are we doing? So we have like a purpose and our objectives, but how are we accomplishing those through actions? We have guest speakers. We gather qualitative data through interviews and listening sessions. We organize and report out that data and findings to the larger community and city council. So that page will kind of outline our work. Slide 3, slide 4 is again, a large continual list of some of the harms that we can start to culminate through the education community, right? So I just kind of started to kick in some of the conversations that we've had so far over the course of our time. The lack of bonds or the lack of economic investment, the lack of the legislation that Spark talks about that restricted the growth of the Kansas City public schools, the white flight that led to surrounding districts. Those are some of the things that initially I thought of that we've listed out as harms that we know of, that we may be able to do more research into. But I wanted this slide to really provide a summary or start to kind of take notes on what are some of the things that we feel are some of those direct lines of harm from either pieces of legislation or lack of investment. And then from 4 to 5, the slide 5 just goes into recommendations to repair those harms. So we could start jotting down notes around some of the ideas. Not really. You're kind of cutting in and out.
Brother, if I jump in here real quick.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to jump in. My bad. Excuse me real quick, bro. But you just reminded me of an email I saw from Sister Janae. And so when I'm rolling with my son right now, but when I get to the house, I'll send the I'll send the summary since she had gave permission to send it over, because that's actually what that was needed for. But since she said that can be sent over, I'll email that out to everybody in that email that she had linked that on. So y'all be seeing, by tonight, the culmination of the harms, the harms, the timeline of how it was, of what happened, the
Mhm.
how it can be repaired, and solutions, who was the harm, all this extra thing. So
Right.
she said that we could send it out, so I'll send that out tonight, and so we could have a nice head start, actually, every committee on all of those questions. So
Yeah, was it done by the coalition? Is that what?
yeah, yeah, we did that. We finalized that. That was actually a summary piece that was just like the proposal sent for the budget. It was a summary piece for the ordinance, so that they saw the whole outline. And so it's, just well prepared. It's separates out every committee, and the who, what, when, where, why, and some sort of a timeline that goes in there. So
Yeah, well, that'd be great if you could send us that overview. That way we can have these two things to review, right? We can overview the coalition's harms and recommendations statement, and we can review this document, and we can spend the next meeting. That can be our work. It's to kind of coalesce the two and to create updates based on what we've read new, and what we have here. Because I like to use this space to specifically collect our thoughts as a subcommittee, and we'll use this slideshow and our notes from this slideshow and our minutes to be able to then start to construct the education subcommittee, our specific harm statement once we get to the end of our work, right? So we'll be able to keep
Sure.
track of the notes and stuff that we've been having here.
Sounds good.
nice.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, the only thing that I have on this recommendations list right now is the upcoming bond vote, because I know we've had a lot of conversations about how that could help start to make steps in the right direction towards the lack of investment that we've seen in the Kansas City public schools. The last slide is just the participants that we've had so far. I'd love to take a minute real quick and just put a couple quick sentences or words, since I have you all here, about what were some of the takeaways that if you all remember. I want to get those as fresh as they can, which is not very fresh, but some of the takeaways that we have from our guest speakers, and then we can spend 5 or 6 minutes here planning on future guest speakers, because that's what the next item on the agenda is also.
Okay.
Was to look at that upcoming. So what do we all remember back with AJ Lowe? Professor AJ Lowe was our very first speaker. He really focused on lynch culture. Do you guys remember any other major takeaways or things that you all remember from Professor AJ Lowe's presentation?
Didn't take any notes, so I have to say nothing stands out for me.
Okay. What about Sparks? Sparks the one that does the history of Kansas.
Well, about that first, brother, with the lynch culture, his presentation was a striking one, because he didn't only lay out the lynchings that happened after Civil War, but he laid them out, the ones that happened leading up to, it was like the 50s. And not only that, but then to directed them towards what happened in this Kansas City area, and then areas that were basically landmarks that were, our landmarks per se, not marked, unmarked landmarks, right? Of areas that those things happened. And he also had provided a brief a brief history that went into a brief education on the schooling systems. And so yeah, his presentation was actually really good because he tied a lot of he just tied a lot of those people together that did. Yeah, he was a good presentation, so I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, I think the thing as you mentioned it, some things are coming back. What stuck out to me was around like his specific definition of lynching and how, I'm pretty sure I remember thinking about like a lack of education or disinvestment in education as a form of lynching, right? And as lynching as terrorism, right? And how education and lack of opportunities in education and lynching as a terrorist culture or as a terrorist mechanism were related. And I found that to be extremely interesting and thoughtful, illuminating thought that I had never really had before. So I agree. He did have a really striking presentation. What about Spark Bookhart? He was the one that really focused on the history of Kansas City education. He was the speaker for the listening session as well. So I think he did us twice. We heard him twice. Right. Anything that stuck out to you all about his work?
Well, Spark and I have been colleagues in the educational space for many years, over almost 2 decades. So, the work that he's doing in elucidating the history of particularly the history through the DSEG era is extremely important for us to understand not only how we are in the situation we're in, but how major efforts that were supposed to help us to move forward have not done so, and the reasons why. I mean, there was over $2 billion spent in the Kansas City public schools, most of them to build buildings, but also to increase teacher salaries. We had a significant desegregation in the teaching corps, no desegregation to speak of in the student population. And as opposed to the idea that desegregation was going to deliver us a good education, the evidence is that, in fact, because we lost Black teachers who had been in the district for a long time and actually had success in educating Black students, when we lost those teachers, our momentum declined. I mentioned that I was in the superintendent's cabinet back in 2001. That was also the time when the school district was let out of the Jenkins case. It was declared unitary, and I also did some research in that time around test scores and so forth. That I'll share with this. I'll dig that up and share with this committee as well.
And then right after, so the next experiment to occur will be the charter schools, right. Charter school law, right? So after we got released from the Jenkins case, it was only 6 years later or so they passed the charter schools experiment. 7 years.
No, actually, charter schools legislation was passed in '98.
Oh, 98.
So it in '98. So it was actually passed 3 years before the district was let out of the Jenkins case.
Okay.
And by the way, charter school test scores became important in the court case before Judge Russell.
Even though they had been in play for 2 or 3 years at the time.
Yeah. They had results. And those results were interesting in terms of what they implied, but we don't have time to talk about it now. But I can say that.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Bowles, anything around Sparks' presentation?
Well, I mean, I just remember him doing like pretty good timeline for laying out the schools. He went from, yeah, that was just about it. It was timeline he did or whatever that was well put together. I mean, because as y'all may well know, the HR 40 specifically calls out itself for a timeline within its literature.
Sure.
And so, just how, if you look at other ordinances, other cities' ordinances or anything, you'll see the year they start out, 1555, they'll start out, they'll go 1565, 1573, this happened. And so he had laid out something that, not like you see in an ordinance, of course, there was a presentation, but he laid it out good for the PowerPoint and whatnot. So
yeah, absolutely. I think this is a superintendent turnover timeline for me as well. That really does a great job of illustrating the turmoil, and then again, like the context that we currently sit in. And I'm pretty sure it was Sparks' presentation that I heard finally for the first time, the legislation that restricts the growth of the Kansas City public schools, but allows the growth of the Kansas City metropolitan area, which is an extreme. That's bad. That's a bad thing. It had a huge negative effect. So I'm gonna add that as well. Legislation restricting growth KCPS. Okay, from Kokithia's presentation, I know that for me, it's the current student achievement data. And how students are currently faring and how that data splices. Any data or any takeaways from her presentation that stick out to you all?
I missed that presentation, but I've worked with Kokithia for a long time as well, so I know that data.
Yeah, there's a new set out. I missed it last week, but
I should say Dr. Hill. I said Kokithia. Dr. Hill. I want to always acknowledge when our folks do things higher education.
Yeah, that's only respectful, that's how it goes. But I do remember hers, and it was another good one just because of she was the KC Black, right?
Yes.
Black, yeah, and it was actually phenomenal to see, like, in a few years what they had put together as far as a whole committee of education teachers and superintendents they were bringing in to sit on boards. They were teaching teachers to come in, then they were sending them to our areas, and then they were putting others onto boards and have them on boards all across the state, and in Kansas too. So there was like 32 people that she has on, there's like 32 people that she has that's on the board or that's affiliated with that KC Black in certain areas, and very strategic ones. There's that Terrell Jolly that that the university is going to meet with later on. They had ended up, he's one of those people that's on that board. So, that would be just a good chance to peak anything, because that, he's going to be there at that to do a presentation for them. So, if y'all were in attendance, but I'm gonna have to look at the schedule and see if I'll be there anyway. So.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. Okay. What about Dr. Collier, Superintendent KCPS? She was a speaker for us in the listening session. I think again for me it was the dilapidated state of schools. State of schools and I'm still not right. Dilapidated. And the lack of again financial investment in the KC public schools. Any other things stand out to you all from Professor or Dr. Collier's presentation at the listening session?
I did not make that session, so maybe Commissioner Bowles.
All right, we're running up close to time here, so I think we heard that Professor Tahi would be our speaker for next time, and if we have a listening session planned, I think we may do one around June once school is out. I think that'd be a good idea.
Sounds good.
Listening session 2. That means we're looking for a May speaker, a July and an August speaker. I heard a couple names, Kevin and Jimmy Ballard.
Ballard, B-U-L-L.
Ballard.
Yeah.
Spell that again.
B-U-L-L-A-R-D.
Ballard. Should we add them in May? Can you be responsible? I heard Commissioner Bowles say you're responsible for reaching out for that.
Right.
Okay, he's probably just getting home and trying to get settled.
Yeah.
Any ideas about July or August? We'll probably be getting into research time at that point.
Hopefully.
Maybe some qualitative options. I can think of like I tried to have a couple parents get lined up for us like we had at listening sessions. So if we're actually in research at that point, we could find someone who actually experienced maybe something that's being researched and we could have them come and speak.
Sure. I have some ideas, so I'll reach out. I don't want to say names now, but I can reach out to some folks who were very, very important in that Kansas City public school process.
Okay. Sounds good. I would love to open it up for public comment.
Okay.
With our last minute or so.
Okay, I've got Joe Nelson who has his hand raised. Hold on for 1 second. All right, Joe, you can unmute yourself. You're able to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Good to see you, Joe.
All right. So I've been following this, and I just wanted to comment. I think there's a lot of good content. I would encourage the committee to sync up with the housing committee and really dig into the numbers, the economic impact, particularly around the redlining. And you hit all the major timeline events, but there's some real solid dollars that can be drawn from that can be tied to specific ordinances or laws, and looking at particular areas and what the property value of those places were, and the property taxes that were taken that went to the school district. So you can almost remove some of the other factors, not because they're not significant, but because, to sway some of the folks that aren't as moved by some of the more subjective, in air quotes, things. But if you can really see that there was deliberate consequences that were reaped in terms of economics, because 80+% of the budget for the school is derived from property taxes. So I was just encouraged there to be a syncing up with the housing committee to make sure that the narrative is the same and that some of those numbers are drawn out from an economic standpoint.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, and that'll be it from the audience. I don't see anyone with their hand up.
Yeah, as I think about that specifically, it would be a matter of like trying to identify how many homes or what percentage of homes are inside of the Kansas City metropolitan area, inside of Kansas City boundaries, but in technically one of those satellite districts, right? So, you know, if we could, that will kind of be my first step in thinking about that housing piece. Like you said, Joe, the majority of funding comes from the housing, and as those suburban areas started to pop up, those property values started to go up. But some of them that were still in the Kansas City metropolitan area were not contributing to the Kansas City public schools. So absolutely an area we'll be taking a look. I appreciate you. Since there's no more public comments, I'll take this opportunity to adjourn. Really appreciate everybody's work, thoughtfulness, intentionality, and presence. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.